Have you ever had a strange moment where your mind just blanked out? Maybe you forgot where you were going while walking down the hallway, or suddenly your words came out jumbled, like your mouth and your brain weren't on the same page. If that's ever happened to you, please, stay with me for the next few minutes, because as someone who has cared for thousands of stroke patients over the last 15 years, I've seen far too many of them ignore these early warnings and pay the price later. Hi, I'm Dr. Ariana. I specialize in brain health, and I work closely with seniors just like you, men and women who are active, independent, and full of life, until one day something changed. You see, stroke doesn't always come like a lightning bolt. Sometimes it whispers first. It sends a small signal, a warning. But the problem is, those warnings often get brushed off as just aging and just stress or just a bad day. I'm here today because I don't want you or someone you love to make that mistake. Because stroke is not just a sudden event. It's often the result of signs we've overlooked again and again. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 stroke risk signs that I see ignored far too often, and why noticing them early could protect your memory, your mobility, and even your life. Let's begin. I'll never forget a patient I met not long ago, Mr. Halverson, 72 years old. He came in with what he called a silly little spell. Said he was reading the newspaper when his right hand suddenly felt heavy. The pen dropped. He couldn't quite grip his coffee mug. It lasted maybe 5 minutes, then passed. So he didn't tell anyone, not even his wife. 3 days later, he was rushed to the ER. A massive stroke had taken half his mobility and half his speech. That's why I'm shocked. Not because seniors experience these early symptoms. Sadly, that part is common. What shocks me is how many of you ignore them. Or worse, blame yourselves. I've heard it all. Oh, I was probably just tired. I stood up too fast. My memory isn't what it used to be. Or the one that breaks my heart the most. I didn't want to bother my kids. Please, my dear viewer, listen to me as someone who truly cares. When your brain sends a signal, it's not to inconvenience you, it's to protect you. These little moments, those slips, those sudden waves of dizziness, confusion, or numbness are not random. They're warnings. And when we act early, we can stop a life-altering stroke from ever happening. But when we dismiss them as nothing, we miss our chance to prevent something truly devastating. That's why I created this video, not to scare you, but to empower you. Because knowledge gives you the power to act, to protect yourself, and to keep living life with the dignity, independence, and clarity you deserve. Now let's talk about the first warning sign. It's subtle, but absolutely critical. Sudden confusion or feeling disoriented. Have you ever found yourself in a room and suddenly thought, wait, why did I come in here? That's normal. We all forget little things from time to time. But what I'm talking about is something different. Imagine you're walking to the kitchen, and for a few moments, you don't just forget what you came for. You're not even sure where you are. Or maybe you're talking to your daughter on the phone, and suddenly, her words stop making sense. Or worse, your own words do. This kind of sudden confusion, that's not just aging. It can be your brain's way of telling you that blood flow was briefly interrupted, even for just a minute or two. Let me tell you about Mrs. Elaine, a lovely 69-year-old woman who came to my clinic last year. She was out grocery shopping when she stopped in the middle of the bread aisle and just stood there. She told me, "Dr. Ariana, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I got there." And it only lasted 5 minutes. She thought she was just overwhelmed. But what she experienced was likely a TIA, a transient ischemic attack. Some people call it a mini stroke. I call it a major warning. You see, when blood doesn't reach certain areas of the brain, especially the parts responsible for memory and orientation, it's like turning off the power to a room. Things go dim. You lose track of time, space, and what's around you. And here's the part that makes my job so difficult. Most people recover within minutes. so they assume they're fine. But statistically, up to 1 in 3 people who experience a TIA will have a full-blown stroke within 12 months, many within just 48 hours. So what should you do if this ever happens? First, don't brush it off. Second, tell someone right away. Third, write down exactly what you felt, what time it started, how long it lasted, and how you felt after. If you can, get checked at an emergency room, especially if you have a history of high blood pressure, heart disease, or diabetes. Remember, your brain doesn't send confusion for no reason. It's a flare in the night sky. It's saying, pay attention to me now before it's too late. And paying attention just one time might be what protects you from something that changes everything. Let's keep going. The next sign is something so many seniors experience, but rarely connect to their brain. Sudden loss of balance or dizziness. Have you ever stood up and felt like the room tilted just a bit? Or found yourself grabbing for the wall because your legs suddenly didn't feel steady? Maybe you brushed it off as being tired, dehydrated, or just a bad moment. But if it came on suddenly, without warning, and made you feel unstable, you need to pay close attention. Because for many of my patients, that's exactly how their first stroke warning arrived. Let me tell you about Mr. Raymond, a retired teacher, 74 years old. He was watering the plants on his porch one morning when, out of nowhere, he said it felt like his whole world tilted sideways. No pain, no warning, just dizziness. So strong he had to sit down on the steps. It passed in under 10 minutes. He chalked it up to standing in the sun too long. But a week later, he had a stroke that left his right side partially paralyzed. You see, balance is a delicate dance between your brain, your inner ear, and your blood flow. When something disrupts that, especially sudden changes in blood supply to the cerebellum, the part of your brain that controls coordination, it can feel like your body just isn't listening to you anymore. For older adults, this is especially risky, not just because it may signal a stroke, but because the dizziness itself can lead to falls. And as you and I both know, falls are one of the greatest threats to independence as we age. But here's the part that surprises most people. Even if the dizziness only lasts a minute, it still matters, especially if it happens while you're resting or without any clear cause. So what can you do? First, don't try to shake it off or walk it off. Sit down. Second, if you feel the room spinning, your vision blurring, or your body swaying, call someone. Third, track when it happens. Write it down. Dizziness that comes out of nowhere and disappears just as quickly is not something to ignore. You deserve to feel steady, grounded, safe in your own body. If something feels off, even for a moment, it's your brain's way of raising a red flag. Don't let pride or fear keep you from listening. Now, let's look at another subtle sign that many seniors write off as eye strain, when it may actually be something far more serious. Sudden blurred or lost vision in one eye. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever opened your eyes in the morning or turned your head while reading and suddenly one side of your vision just faded? Like someone pulled a curtain over one eye? Or maybe everything went blurry, or you saw strange flashes of light? If that's ever happened to you, even just once, I need you to hear this. It could be more than tired eyes. It could be your brain trying to tell you something. I remember one of my patients, Mrs. Janice, 70 years old, telling me her story. She was looking out the window one afternoon, enjoying her cup of tea, when her right eye suddenly went dark, as she described it. No pain, no warning. It felt like someone had turned off a light switch. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and within 10 minutes, it cleared up. She didn't tell her family. She assumed it was her glasses. 2 days later, she suffered a stroke that affected her ability to read and write. You see, your eyes may be healthy, but they're only the messengers. The image you see is processed by the visual center in the back of your brain. And if blood flow to that part is interrupted, even briefly, your vision can suddenly change. It's not always total blindness. It might be a shadow on one side, blurred or double vision, seeing flashing lights or colors. trouble focusing or tracking movement, and the scariest part? It often comes and goes quickly. That's why many seniors don't say anything. They think it was a trick of the light, or that they just need a new prescription. But when one eye suddenly stops cooperating and there's no clear cause, that's a red flag for stroke risk. So what should you do? First, never ignore changes in your vision that come on suddenly. Second, if one eye goes dark or blurry, even for a few minutes, seek medical help. Third, if it happens more than once, write it down and talk to your doctor as soon as possible. Your eyes may be the first place your brain tells its story. Please don't miss the chapter where it's asking for help. Next, we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood and most dangerous stroke warnings of all: numbness or weakness on one side of the body. Have you ever felt your arm go numb after sleeping on it the wrong way? That's normal. It happens to all of us. But what if your hand suddenly felt heavy for no reason? What if your leg gave out when you stood up, even though you hadn't done anything unusual? Or your face felt like it was drooping on one side, but no one told you? This kind of sudden numbness or weakness, especially if it's only on one side of the body, is one of the most classic and serious signs of stroke. Let me explain why. Your brain controls each side of your body in a beautifully organized way. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and vice versa. So if a blood clot or blockage interrupts the flow to one side of the brain, the opposite side of your body may suddenly stop responding normally. You might feel a tingling in your fingers or toes, a dull heaviness in your arm or leg. Your grip feels weak. You can't lift your arm fully. Your smile appears uneven in the mirror. I once had a patient, Mr. Thomas, who noticed he couldn't hold his coffee mug in the morning. He thought it was arthritis, or just old age catching up. That evening, he couldn't lift his arm at all. By the time he got to the ER, we had lost precious hours. And while he survived, he never regained full use of his right hand. The scary thing is, many seniors assume weakness is just something that comes with aging. But weakness that comes on suddenly, without warning, that is a neurological emergency. So here's a simple test you can do right now, or teach to someone you love. Raise both arms straight in front of you. Close your eyes. If one arm drifts downward or feels weak, seek help. Another version? Smile into a mirror if one side of your mouth looks lower or your face feels strange. Don't wait. Even if it lasts only a few minutes. Even if it goes away completely. Those are the most dangerous ones of all because they lull you into thinking it's nothing. But your brain is speaking up. Let's not wait until it goes silent. Now, let's move on to the final warning sign, one that involves your speech and is often mistaken for tiredness or nerves. Slurred speech or trouble finding words. Let me ask you gently. Have you ever tried to say something simple, but the words just wouldn't come out right? Maybe you knew what you wanted to say, but couldn't get the word to land. Or maybe your speech came out slow, heavy, or slurred, almost like you'd had a glass of wine even though you hadn't touched a drop. That's not just being tired, that's not just getting older. That could be a stroke trying to speak through you before it takes your voice away. I remember a woman named Diane, 73 years old, who called her daughter one morning. Midway through the call, her daughter said, "Mom, what's wrong with your voice?" Diane didn't notice anything. She felt fine, but she had been repeating words and speaking slower than usual. Her daughter rushed over and took her to the hospital. And it's a good thing she did, because Diane had experienced a mini stroke, what we call a TIA, and that quick action likely saved her life. You see, the part of your brain responsible for language and speech is incredibly sensitive to blood flow. Even a brief interruption can cause slurred or slowed speech, repeating the same word over and over, mixing up syllables or letters, trouble understanding others, a blank feeling when trying to speak. And here's the truly heartbreaking part. Many seniors don't realize they're doing it. It often takes a family member or friend to notice. So what should you do? If you ever feel your words getting tangled, stop and take notice. If someone tells you your voice sounds different, don't brush it off. Try saying a simple sentence like, "The sky is blue today." If it sounds off, get help. Your voice is one of the most precious parts of who you are. It holds your stories, your laughter, your love. Please don't let a stroke take it without warning. We've now talked about all 5 signs, but the most important part comes next. What you do with this information could make all the difference. Let's talk about that. In the final message I want to leave with you today. So now you've heard the 5 stroke risk signs I see far too many seniors ignore. Let's go over them one more time, gently, together. Sudden confusion or feeling lost, unexpected dizziness or loss of balance, blurred or darkened vision in one eye, numbness or weakness on one side of the body, slurred speech or trouble finding words. If you've experienced even one of these, even if it lasted only a few minutes, please don't ignore it. You might feel fine now. You might think it's nothing. But your brain remembers, and it's asking you to pay attention, not later, but now. Early signs don't mean weakness. They mean you have a chance to act. And in stroke care, time is not just important, it's everything. The sooner you speak up, the greater the chance you have of protecting your speech, your mobility, your independence, your life. I know it can feel frightening. I know many of you are used to pushing through or not wanting to make a fuss, but this is not a time to stay silent. So what can you do today? Write these 5 signs down. Tape them to your refrigerator or inside a kitchen cabinet. Share them with your spouse, your neighbor, your best friend. Tell your adult children what to look out for so they can help you just like you helped them all those years. You're not alone, and you don't have to go through this in fear or silence. I'm Dr. Ariana, and I created this message because I care deeply for people like you, strong, wise, kind-hearted. And on our channel, Elderly Whisper, we'll continue to gently guide you, protect you, and remind you of the power you still hold. Take care of your beautiful brain. We'll see you in the next video.